fact that ministers were unaware of these things is actually proof of my lack of interference or intervention in any of their activities, and that I honoured the basis upon which I sought those powers because I was only ever going to use them in an emergency situation that would require that.
It's a little-known fact that the Prime Minister is not mentioned in the Constitution. The Constitution speaks of ministers of state, and our system of government works on the principle of collective responsibility for decisions exercised by the Cabinet. Scott Morrison argued today that the reason he had appointed himself to 5 crucial portfolios in 2020 and 2021 was because they were ones in which ministers have significant powers to take decisions without Cabinet approval. His comments seem to show a fairly comprehensive misunderstanding of both the Constitution's silence on the role of the Prime Minister and of the idea of collective responsibility.
As Prime Minister, only I could really understand the weight of responsibility that was on my shoulders and on no one else. And as a result, I took the decisions that I thought I needed to take. In all the portfolios that I sought to have these authorities put in place, they were portfolio areas where ministers could exercise unilateral decisions without reference to Cabinet.
In other words, Scott Morrison as Prime Minister wanted to be in a position to make those unilateral decisions the law entrusts to ministers in the health, finance, treasury, home affairs and resources portfolios. For example, cancelling gas projects, overseeing foreign investment powers and approving surveillance warrants, if he needed to, but insisting he didn't actually want to. His rationale seemed to betray a certain besieged state of mind amid the pressures of a pandemic.
There was a clear expectation established in the public's mind, certainly in the media's mind, and absolutely certainly in the mind of the opposition, as I would walk into question time every day, that I as Prime Minister was responsible pretty much for every single thing that was going on. Every drop of rain, every strain of the virus, everything that occurred over that period of time.
But whether or not Scott Morrison felt responsible for every single thing his government may have done or not done during the past couple of years, none of his answers today really explain the fact that he did not feel compelled to tell his colleagues that he had given himself the power to override the decisions that the laws of the land gave them alone the power to make. Presuming those ministers were all operating under the impression that they worked in a Cabinet government, you would wonder what sort of riot there would be if he had disclosed this to his colleagues around the Cabinet table. Mr Morrison said today he had only used that discretion once in the case of overriding his Resources Minister Keith Pitt, but he only told Pitt when he had decided to make this unprecedented intervention.
And that is what I would have done in every other circumstance.
That is, if some matter had come up in another portfolio where he wanted to overrule a minister, he would have told that minister of his status as a joint minister as he was overruling them. The former Prime Minister had started down the track of shadowing his ministers with his appointment to the health portfolio in March 2020. Morrison's move was based on the advice of the then Attorney-General Christian Porter. But when Mr Morrison moved into Porter's own portfolio 14 months later, he didn't bother mentioning it to him.
Why didn't you tell him that?
Well, I had no intention of exercising any powers or authorities in his department. I had no intention.
I think it's an incorrect understanding of our system of government, and it's actually quite worrying because it's moving more towards a presidential type of system of government.
So Scott Morrison was running a cabinet where he had put in place a system to overrule the authority of ministers within their own portfolios, but also did not take the cabinet into his confidence about how much power he was potentially usurping.
The Prime Minister's role is often described as first among equals. And the equals part is important because they're all ministers in the ministry and the cabinet, and collectively they make decisions. So it's not the case that the Prime Minister has some kind of magic power that allows him to override and exercise statutory powers that are conferred on other ministers.
There has been considerable focus over the past few days on the role of the man who appoints ministers in the first place, the Governor-General. These appointments are made under Section 64 of the Constitution, which says the GG may appoint officers to administer government departments. These simply need an administrative approval, usually done via the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, talking to the Governor-General's official secretary.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and a very warm welcome to Government House.
On May the 6th last year, when David Hurley was signing off on Scott Morrison becoming both Minister for Home Affairs and the Treasurer, the public images of the GG's Day were focused on different things.
For a very special day in the lives of our recipients.
Mr Hashim Abdul Rahman.
What we don't know at the moment is, for example, whether the Governor-General was even aware that this was going to be secret, that it didn't have Cabinet knowledge or approval, or that the particular minister involved hadn't been told. I suspect probably most of that came as a surprise to the Governor-General later on.
Late this afternoon, David Hurley put out another statement on the controversy, which defended his role and pointedly said that he had, quote, no reason to believe that appointments would not be communicated. Constitutional lawyer Anne Toomey says the whole process of recording who has been appointed as ministers seems to be a remarkably lax one.
Well, that's actually the real problem here. So we do need to reform things so that that kind of really basic information about which minister is exercising which powers under legislation and which responsibilities is publicly known.
The former Prime Minister's explanation seems to leave a lot of questions hanging. The biggest questions: what was the PM's motivation for secrecy? And does the Governor-General's assertion that publicising appointments is a matter for the government of the day hold water? The High Court found the Executive, that's Cabinet, has a formal responsibility to inform the Parliament of its actions, according to a 1997 High Court interpretation of Section 64. That's the same one under which the Governor-General appoints ministers. While Scott Morrison has apologised to his colleagues for not telling them what he had done, that would suggest the real apology is owed to the people and the Parliament for failing to inform them of his actions.